We've all seen the headlines, right? Government shutdown looms. It sounds chaotic, almost apocalyptic, and for a lot of people, it really is. But here's the crazy thing, the paradox we're going to dig into today. While Washington, D.C. is in full-blown crisis mode, Wall Street just kind of carries on. So today, we're cutting through all the noise. No politics, no spin, just the raw mechanics of what's really going on. I mean, on one side, you've got this picture of complete political chaos. You have total deadlock, hundreds of thousands of people getting sent home without a paycheck, and basic government services just stopping. But then you look at the other side, the financial markets, and they often react with, well, business as usual. It's a disconnect that just doesn't feel right.
So what gives? What does Wall Street know that the rest of us don't? How can something so disruptive for so many people cause so little panic in the financial world? Well, to get to the bottom of that, we first have to understand what a shutdown actually is. Because honestly, it's not what most people think.
Let's talk about the shutdown machine. And that word required is the key. See, a government shutdown isn't really a choice someone makes at the last minute. It's an automatic, legal thing that happens because of inaction. You can almost think of it like a giant circuit breaker for all of government spending.
The reason for this is a law called the Anti-Deficiency Act. Now, this law makes it flat out illegal for any federal agency to spend a single dollar that Congress hasn't given it permission to spend. So when that funding deadline comes and goes without a new budget, there's no grace period. The whole system is literally designed to stop dead in its tracks the second the political process gets overloaded.
So here's how it all plays out. A funding deadline is coming up. Congress has to pass either a budget or some kind of temporary extension. If they don't get it done, the moment the clock strikes midnight, poof, the legal authority to spend money just evaporates. And by law, every agency has to immediately start sending workers home and stopping any program that's not essential. It's not a political statement at that point, it's just them following the law.
Okay, and this is where that legal mechanism gets twisted into a powerful political weapon. Because these shutdowns, they don't just happen by accident. They happen by design, as a tool to get what you want.
Now here's the insight that most people completely miss. You do not need a majority in Congress to cause a shutdown. Nope. All it takes is a small, determined group in the House or the Senate to block a funding bill, or a president who's willing to use their veto. And that dynamic is what turns the shutdown from what looks like a bug in the system into a feature for political fights.
And this quote right here, it pretty much captures the entire brutal logic behind it. A shutdown is just a high-stakes game of chicken. The strategy is to inflict so much pain on workers, on the public, on the economy, that your opponents finally give in and give you what you want, whether that's spending cuts or some other policy change. And believe me, this is not ancient history. Just look at the mess from late 2023 into 2024. A shutdown was avoided by just a few hours, which led to the historic firing of a House Speaker. Then we got this weird two-tiered funding patch that just kicked the can down the road, creating even more deadlines. Each one of those last-minute deals wasn't a real solution. It was just postponing the inevitable crisis.
So now that we understand the mechanics, let's talk about the real-world fallout. What is the actual price of all this political gridlock? Because the cost isn't some abstract thing. You can measure it in people's lives, and it ripples out in ways you might not even think of.
Let's just start with this one number, 850,000. In a full government shutdown, up to 850,000 federal employees can be told to go home. That means no work, no paycheck, and absolutely no idea when they'll be able to come back. That is an incredible amount of financial stress and uncertainty for hundreds of thousands of American families.
And then you have this situation which is just surreal. The people we call essential workers, think about our military, TSA agents, air traffic controllers, they're legally required to show up to their jobs. But because of that same Anti-Deficiency Act, they are legally forbidden from getting paid for their work until the shutdown is over. You know, your mortgage company and the grocery store don't really care about a political deal.
All right, now let's zoom out and look at the whole economy. The longest shutdown we've ever had back in 2018, 2019 cost the U.S. economy $11 billion. But look closer at that second bar. $3 billion of that was permanently lost. It wasn't just delayed spending, it was actual productivity and income that just vanished forever. So shutdowns don't save money. They're basically a form of economic self-harm that's disguised as being fiscally responsible.
And you know, there's another cost that you can't see on a balance sheet: public trust. During these shutdowns, people's confidence in our government just tanks. When half the country says they have hardly any confidence in Congress to do its job, it really shows you how these self-inflicted wounds damage the very foundation of the system.
Okay, so we've established the process is automatic, the politics are absolutely brutal, and the human and economic costs are very, very real. So that brings us right back to our central mystery. Why, with all of this chaos, does Wall Street just seem to shrug its shoulders?
I mean, the hard data here is just completely backwards from what you'd expect. During the 16-day shutdown in 2013, the stock market actually went up 3.1%. During the longest shutdown in history, it surged 10%. On average, the market return during a shutdown is basically nothing. It's flat. The numbers clearly show that, historically, a shutdown has not been the kind of event that kills the market.
So what is the market's logic? Well, first, investors pretty much see the economic damage as temporary. They figure it'll bounce back once the government reopens. Second, let's be honest, they've seen this movie before, and they've learned that a deal, no matter how messy, always gets made in the end. Third, the really critical stuff, like the government making payments on its debt, that continues. And finally, Wall Street is just way more worried about the big stuff, like what the Federal Reserve is doing with interest rates, than with what they see as short-term political drama.
And that really brings us to our final takeaway. The markets might not panic because the direct economic hit seems manageable, but that does not mean there isn't a cost. The real damage from this constant cycle of crisis isn't to our 401ks, it's the slow, steady chipping away of our trust in the government's basic ability to function. And that leaves us with one last big question. When does that bill finally come due?
If you want deeper, no-nonsense breakdowns of how politics, policy, and markets really connect, subscribe to Market Black Box. We open the lid so you don't have to guess.